So I started Little Lights in 1995 after my own personal spiritual conversion. I was a very devout atheist in college and went through a very tough drug experience after college. And it was a really difficult time. I went through a lot of fear, but ultimately I experienced compassion through my sister, and then eventually found myself at a church and heard a sermon from a pastor, and I really felt like I was in the right place. And so after my spiritual conversion, I started volunteering in the neighborhood where my parents owned a small business. And they had opened up a second business. It was a taekwondo studio, and I started helping out there and started meeting kids in this lower income neighborhood where my parents owned a business in DC, and just fell in love with the kids and just felt a deep compassion for the kids. I think one particular young man named Daryl, who I met as I volunteered, and I realized in 8th grade he could not read a Dr. Seuss book. And that really broke my heart for him. He was a really gentle kid. He played football on his middle school team, but could not read a Dr. Seuss book in 8th grade. And so I felt convicted to want to help kids like Daryl, who are behind academically, who needed relationship, who are obviously lacking resources. And that's how Little Lights ultimately got started in 1995. And so that's what I've been doing ever since.
Boys, this is where you keep your toys all clean.
Prior to volunteering at Little Lights, I met Steve a couple months ago at my sister's post-bridal shower. And I just got to hear what he was doing, and I was just fascinated that as a Korean American guy, he was doing this type of work without pay, and so passionate about this work. And so it was really interesting for me to hear about what he was doing. While I was looking for work, I called Steve up and asked if I could volunteer. And at that time he was like, well, do you have a backpack? And I said, yes. So he said, come on down to DC. So I went to DC, and my first experience just walking into the public housing, I had kids run up to me and hug me, and kids who did not know me, and I was just overwhelmed by their compassion towards me, just how they greeted me without even knowing me. And it's just amazing. It was a lot of fun. And so that was my first experience being at Little Lights.
Probably the biggest lessons when you're trying to create a nonprofit and sustain it is, one, you have to persevere, that you can't give up easily. There's a lot of discouragements that come, there's failures that come, and there's mistakes that you're inevitably going to make as you're trying to learn. And so just being committed and not giving up and persevering, but also being teachable and humble, knowing that there's going to be setbacks, and it's okay to have setbacks. It's okay to have failures, as long as you can keep learning from it. I think those are some of the deepest lessons, is to persevere, not give up, keep learning, stay humble, but stay passionate and committed. We really try to weave ourselves into the fabric of the community. Like Mary mentioned earlier, one of the benefits is, some of the young kids that we grew up with are now coming back and serving with us and becoming staff members. And some have come as part-time staff members, and we were their first job after high school or college, and now they've gone on to other full-time work after they work with us. We're very holistic as well, so we don't just deal with kids, we don't just deal with academics. We really deal with the whole person and the whole family, and really the community that they're in. So we do economic empowerment programs. We have a landscaping social enterprise to give job training and jobs to adults in the community. A family center to help adults build their resume, work on their resume, get resources in the community. So we're very holistic because we know the issues are not superficial, and that they need that one-to-one support and that long-term friendship to try to overcome these many obstacles that prevent them from really flourishing as kids or families.
I think being Korean American and coming into this community, you have to come in respecting the community or learning how to respect the community. I think you can't get in without doing that first. And that just means building relationships. That just means being there every day. That just means gaining trust. That we're here to support, to be with them and not just be here to tell them what's best. And I think that's an important thing to do, especially as an outsider, as somebody coming into a community, that you have to really respect the people who are there and get to know the people.
How has your life changed as a result of working in this kind of, we call it the nexus world, where all these different communities are coming together?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. Maybe Stevie can add to this, but I feel like I'm still changing. I feel like, and that's what's so hard. You can't just say, I finished changing or I'm done. And I think that's why it's been hard 25 years, because every day you're having to look at something and change something about yourself. And it's not an easy thing. It's also great working with Steve, because through his race classes, he's always, I feel like, challenging me to be better, to change, and to see it in a different way. And I think having a partner to help you do that on a daily basis really helped me be a better person in this role for Little Lights.
You have been working together as a couple for a couple of decades. How has it been? I mean, has there been challenges, and has there been opportunities that wouldn't have happened unless you were working as a couple?
Maybe especially when we first started, Little Lights had very little money. So we were both, working probably, 70, 80 hours a week for Little Lights with little to no pay. If we were not a married couple, I don't know if Little Lights would have been able to even get off the ground. It's hard to imagine not doing it as a couple, because we've done it all this time. And so you have meetings to talk about work lying in bed at midnight. So that has its pros and cons. I mean, you can be productive 24/7, but it also means there's sometimes not the boundaries, and you have to be careful to make sure you're not neglecting the kids, neglecting the real personal relationship. And it's hard, because we're both passionate about this work, and so the boundaries do get blurred. I think one thing we're both committed to is paying attention to our kids, not neglecting our kids, and not having the kids be resentful that we did this type of work because we did not have enough time for them. So that's something we've always had the commitment to do, is really prioritize family time, prioritize our own kids, so that they're not neglected, because a lot of us Korean Americans, right, have had experienced parents working 80, 90 hours a week and being latchkey kids and kind of being on our own. I mean, I certainly had that experience. And, we learning the hard work ethic from our parents, but then, I think we've really prioritized, like, making sure we spend time and take vacations with our family and things like that. And so we try to find a balance, but it is challenging for sure.
I think that I agree with Steve. The work is so challenging, and we're so deep in it, and we're part of the community, that it would not work not doing it together. At the same time, it's hard. We're two different people. We have two different opinions, and how to bring it together. And also reminding ourselves that when we're together, even when we're working, that's not dating. We're not on a date, and we have to take the extra time to do that separately. But I would say that we have learned to laugh a lot. I think laughing together, laughing at our mistakes, having fun, and still enjoying what we're doing has helped doing it together. Because I think when the joy is gone, when you stop laughing, it's hard to do this together. And so I think we remind ourselves, and we still do it. We still laugh a lot. We laugh at ourselves, laugh at our mistakes, and continue to have fun and enjoy what we're doing.
How have you responded to the pandemic since March, along with the heightened racial tension, political uncertainty, and economic downturn in our country? How has Little Lights pivoted?
When this happened in March, when schools were shutting down, I think the urgency was there for us to move fast, to change, and to create online tutoring sessions for our students. To also continue with meal distributions 5 days a week in a safe way. And so we had to quickly adjust, change, and mobilize to do things differently. We had to get laptops, internet access to our students. So I would say that it's been very difficult for our students. And it's still difficult for our students in being able to attend school in this way and do things virtually. But I do feel like we have been able to stay connected with the community members and check in on our families on a daily basis during this crisis.
So we did have to pivot to become a more relief organization because we couldn't see the kids in person. Getting donations of groceries, masks, providing the tablets that had internet access and other tech equipment to try to bridge the gap. Because we saw the urgent need, we had really no choice but to shift quickly. And our staff, did a great job of being nimble and being willing to be flexible, and even being willing to do the distributions on site, during the pandemic, and trying to create a safe mechanism to do that. And then, of course, all the other operations of the office and fundraising and all the things that a nonprofit has to do to survive, all of that had to pivot. But we're very proud of our staff and how they have really adjusted and been able to even in some ways thrive through this difficult time because we were able to transition and make that pivot. One thing that has become a bigger part of Little Lights is the Race Literacy 101 class. So the Race Literacy 101 is something I've been teaching since 2016. And we had to cancel classes, our in-person class because of the pandemic, but then started the virtual class in June. And we were hoping, maybe we can get 30 people to sign on Zoom for 11 weeks to take this race literacy class. But then after the protest started with George Floyd's death, the interest in the class really grew. And so we had to start 2 extra cohorts. And so over this summer, we've had more than 400 people sign up for the class over the 3 cohorts. It was a major production to get that going and sustainable, to register that many people. And so that's because of the pandemic and the protest, Race Literacy 101 has become a much larger program in what Little Lights does. But I think it's been an amazing experience to see the interest in people really hungry for knowledge and hungry for discussion, safe discussion. And we've had people from literally all over the world take the class because they heard about it. And teaching it online has sort of reaffirmed this, is that basically almost none of us get an adequate education on race growing up. Our school system really doesn't teach it. I mean, there's just basic things about race that people don't learn, that how it was constructed, why was race constructed. Because we know so little about it, some people might think, oh, race is, seeing people through a racial lens is just natural. That's how everybody has seen it through all time. But the ideas of race are fairly recent, and it's connected to the colonialization and the transatlantic slave trade, that these ideas developed really as a justification for injustice. And even in our Asian American history or Korean American history in the United States, we don't learn about how the civil rights movement, which was really centered in the black church, helped to end racial discrimination in U.S. law. And that helped to end racial discrimination in immigration law in 1965. And because of the work of the black church and the civil rights movement, Asian Americans, including Korean Americans, were able to come to the United States in large numbers for the first time after 1965. So there's that connection between the black church and the black community to Korean Americans being in the United States. We never learned that history. And so if a lot of Korean Americans might come, see the wealth disparity between whites and blacks in the United States, and because we don't know the history of systemic racism, we can easily buy into the narrative that, oh, there must be something wrong with black people. There must be something, there might be some people who think there's something inferior about black people. And that's why you see the wealth disparity in the United States across racial lines. But because we don't get that education about how systemic racism has been in the United States, we can make those judgments very quickly. And so those are some of the things that I try to dispel to just help fill in those gaps that we just did not get in our education system. Thinking about the 50th anniversary, we know we'd love for Little Lights to have a big impact for good. One of my favorite words in the Bible is shalom. And shalom is about this holistic prospering and flourishing, flourishing of human life, both emotionally, educationally, economically, physically. And that's what we want for our students. That's what we want for our neighborhoods. We want flourishing to happen. And that's part of the reason I teach the race literacy class, because racism destroys human flourishing and destroys relationship, destroys harmony across ethnic groups and people groups. And so we want to see, our kids flourishing and families being strengthened, marriages being strengthened, people having access to affordable housing. So, I think I can imagine Little Lights just growing in, new ways, as well as sustaining and growing what it's already doing. But ultimately, we want to see loving relationships across racial class lines. We want to see young people flourishing in our city, and growing in their spirituality, growing in their academics, economically, in all these different ways. So ultimately, that's what we'd love to see, and see Little Light centers throughout the city, partnering with other organizations, partnering with other churches, to be part of this unified effort to bring hope into places that need it the most.
I hope that we can serve more students. I hope that we can expand and serve more families. I hope that we can continue to go deeper. I hope that we can provide more programs, more jobs, even a second or third social enterprise, because it's been amazing to help create jobs for young people in the city. And hopefully we could do more of that as we continue to grow in the next 25 years. For the 25 years at Little Lights, I would say Korean American communities have been very generous to supporting the work that we do, the work at Little Lights. So I was just very thankful to the Korean American communities. And I would just say ask the Korean American communities, continue to be more generous and continue to support organizations like ours doing this type of work. And I think the potential is really there. I think that Korean Americans have that ability to be very generous, to have the resources to give. And I would just ask that would not stop, and that would just continue to grow in many ways.
I think there's a responsibility we have to see those who are vulnerable in our society, to not just hoard our privileges that we've been given, to share, to care about justice for others, to care about especially the vulnerable, those who have less power, those who have been disenfranchised, and to see them and to value them and to care for them and to protect them. That we would have a vision to see a better world, and a vision beyond just the American dream, and have, attaining more privileges for ourselves and our family. And so I think that would be my challenge, to gain that greater vision of a more compassionate and just society.
What's the best way to get in touch with Little Lights?
I think probably the easiest way is to go to our website, littlelights.org. Has a lot of information there, and you can learn more about Little Lights there and see what we do, and get in touch with us and connect with us.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having us.